Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. I gotta tell you, we are gonna have a good time today because we've got a great guest for you today. She is a couples therapist, and she works with people that are still couples and would like to remain couples, but aren't really sure how they're gonna get that done because they've got kids and they've got jobs and responsibilities and houses and lawns to mow and things to do. And unfortunately, by the time they get around to being with each other, they're so dang tired, they're done, and it doesn't work out well for them. But she helps you fix it and stuff. So her name is Reesa, and is it Morala?
Morala, you got it.
Awesome. That you have no idea how rare that is when I actually get it right and it's the first time. But welcome to the show. I'm really excited about having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And tell me about your work experience. And I know you've worked in a hospital setting and you have your own therapy clinic now. And you've got all those, those pesky little letters behind your name and stuff. But tell us about you and where you came from. I know you came from your mom and dad, but besides that, what you've been doing and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Well, aside from the birds and bees conversation, as you mentioned.
We're going to have that a little later in the show.
Okay, something to look forward to.
Yeah,
yes, I do have an alphabet soup behind my name. But I actually started, as I was mentioning, kind of probably the most politically correct way to say it is that I grew up in an emotionally immature household. So when I got to be an adult myself, I didn't really have a whole lot of a model or even an instruction manual on how to do life. And really, it started with my on-campus college therapist that finally looked at me and said, "Hey, that life was not normal. So let's talk about how we're going to change it." And we did a lot of great work. And so I did that. My undergrad, actually, surprisingly, is in musical theater. And my senior year, right, it was a couple weeks before graduation, actually, that I got a medical diagnosis that my doctor said, "Hey, you can't really do musical theater anymore. So what's your plan B?" And so I had to figure it out. And I thought back to that therapist that really helped change my life and the trajectory of my life. And so I was very incredibly fortunate to get accepted to a marriage and family therapy program in the University of San Diego when I had never taken a psychology course in my life up until that point. But I got accepted. I went back, I got my prerequisites for psychology and started the program and never looked back.
Well, I gotta ask you because I was in drama and stuff and a little couldn't sing a lick, but I could be in like Fiddler on the Roof and play like Lazar Wolf the Butcher because he didn't have to sing well.
Yes.
Um, or anything, but that must have been very disappointing when you went through all of that because you loved drama and theater and music, and then being told that you couldn't do it anymore.
It was such a disappointment. I definitely struggled with just my own kind of, you're graduating as it is. And I feel like it's a pretty natural place to be in life of going, what now? But my what now was, I just spent 4 years and lots of money earning this degree. And now you're telling me I have to find something different. So it was very devastating. It actually, it took me a little bit before I was able to go back and just watch live theater because there was a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, of looking at the people on stage and going, I could do that, but I can't, but I can. So that was definitely a journey.
What was your favorite role to play when you were in college?
Ooh. I got to play Lucille in Parade. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that show, but it's a very dramatic role, which was it had a lot of meat, and I was able to like sink my teeth into, and it's such a powerful, moving story. That was probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, when I was in college, I got to do Taming of the Shrew, and
Okay.
I was Lazar War or no, excuse me, that's Fiddler. I
Hmm.
was, Petruchio, and I learned 50 pages of Shakespeare. Now, you can't mess around with Shakespeare because if you say the wrong thing, it can screw everything up, and
Yes.
so and I can't remember any of it today.
Yes. I would have to agree. That same year, actually, that I played Lucille, I was also in Midsummer Night's Dream, and I
Oh,
was one of the
great play.
lovers. Yes, and so I too had a giant stack of words to memorize, and my little workers in my brain have decided that is not information we need to keep anymore, so it's long gone.
It was so disappointing because I worked so hard and now I can't remember. I can remember like 1 or 2 lines from the whole darn thing. But you know what? Because you could no longer be in theater for whatever reason, you became somebody that is helping other people figure out this little thing called marriage, kids, life, how it all works, and how you can figure out how to stay together. And because my kid, when I got divorced, my kids were a little older. One was 16, one was 18, and it affected them, even though they
Mhm.
were in their teenage years. The breakup and the vitriol and all the stuff that went along with it, it was not good for them. And so if keeping families together is I can't think of a higher calling than that.
Well, I'm so incredibly honored that the couples that I have worked with do come and do let me be a part of some of the most vulnerable parts of their relationship. It's such an honor to be able to walk through that because it's incredibly difficult and it can feel really lonely. That's one of the reasons why I decided to specialize in this particular part of the therapy world is because I too am a parent. I had my first child was a high medical needs child. We were in and out of the hospital for his first 18 months of life, and it took a toll on my own well being, on my relationship well being. And I got to experience firsthand how little support we parents have in really being able to just support the foundation of that family relationship. And so I looked at it and I said, something's got to change. And if no one else is going to change it, then I'm going to.
Well, the thing is that we when we become parents, we're expected to know stuff that we have no reasonable expectation that we should know. Yet
Yes.
we're expected to know all this stuff. And a lot of times it's really, really tough, especially when the two of you and I'm sure that you've had this happen before where two people will get married and they don't really talk about kids or parenting styles or how they're gonna pull all this off. And then they have a kid and then they have maybe another one, and suddenly they're in battles with each other because not their parenting ideas are different. That never
Mhm.
happens, does it?
Not at all. Um, that's probably 98% of the couples that I work with, actually.
It makes it so tough
Yeah.
when you think that it should be you were raised in a certain way and your dad and your mom did it this way and her mom and dad did it a different way, which couldn't
Mhm.
be as good as your mom and dad's way. And so and then you end up drifting apart a little bit. And
Yeah.
sometimes it can be It can be really devastating to your family and especially to the kids because they see you in a light in a way that you don't really even see yourself acting
Mhm.
towards the other person, and they pick up on that, don't they?
They sure do, and I say it all the time. Children are incredibly perceptive, and I think us as adults, we don't give them enough credit for how perceptive they are.
Yep, and now that my children are now middle-aged, smelly old men, they will tell me of things that happen in their youth that they remember that I don't remember any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And they'll tell me, remember the time that you no, I don't remember the time that whatever it was, and
Uh-huh.
that she did and stuff. But they were couldn't have been more than 8, 9, 10, something like that, and they remember vividly,
Oh,
what
yes.
and even if it wasn't necessarily true, that's
Mhm.
the story that they've been telling themselves for the last 15 years, so now they believe it totally.
Oh, absolutely. I think an ongoing joke between myself and my spouse is anytime something happens, we're like, "Oh, that we're just giving a future therapist a job. That's gonna be something that's talked about."
And and that's coming from a therapist, by the way.
Yes. So I'm
So
keeping somebody else employed in the future too.
well, and that's the thing. You're a therapist of note, and you work with a lot of really important people. But to your child or to your children, you are just mom.
Mhm. I am not only mom, but I'm a mom that, like you said, I didn't have a manual. Yes, I maybe have a little bit more education than, Joe Schmo on the street as far as childhood education and developmental, what's happening, but nobody gave me a manual. So I'm flying by the seat of my pants too.
And that's how, you know, it's amazing to me because I think back to my parents when I was growing up, and she was 19 and he was 21 when they got married. I was the third child. So I asked my mom one time and what dad said when she found out she was pregnant with me, and he said, "Oh, he wasn't too upset." And because I was the accident.
Okay.
Um, I was not the planned one. And so it was, but I remember they were just kids. They were
Hmm.
kids and they grew up in houses that were dysfunctional. And so it became, and I love what you talk about is the generational pattern
Yeah.
that it tends to form. And that's one of the I imagine that's one of the things that you really have to work with.
100%. You mentioned earlier about this idea that we go into these relationships and we kind of have a construct that we're envisioning in our mind of how this family system, how we want to raise this family system, whether it was in stride with what we saw in our own home, or I have a lot of folks that will come in and say I'm trying so hard to be complete opposite because I don't want to do the same thing that my parents did. And and then when you're doing that, it's such a foreign land that you're trying to navigate, and then you're adding somebody else's opinions into it. And if you've got any friends or any family members that think they're expert parenters as well, you're going to have their opinions in it. And so it's just chaos sometimes.
I can only imagine. Well, I don't have to imagine because I know in my house it was chaos sometimes.
Yeah.
Because she would have a different idea. Well, I'll give you an example. My dad was very stoic. He
Okay.
was a manager, and so when he came home, he wanted it quiet. He
Mm,
wanted to be able to relax and enjoy his evening and stuff. And having children running around just wasn't his idea of heaven, if you know what I mean.
absolutely.
And so he was very stoic, very quiet. I ended up in my room a lot because I wasn't
Mm,
quiet and stuff. And so but when I grew up, I wanted to be the exact opposite of him.
Yes.
with my kids. I wanted to explain everything and talk it out and figure out how we can make it work. So much so that one time my wife, who's now my ex-wife, walked by the bedroom door and said, "Would you two just shut up?" Because
Oh no.
because I was trying to get across
Mhm.
a point of view and what he was, and he was debating me. He was all of 12 going on 90, and so he was debating me and stuff, and so we were having this conversation, and she was like, she'd had enough. It's like, just would you just quit it and just shut up? You don't need to be. And so, but that's the difference between generations,
Mhm.
and stuff. So I'm glad that you're doing the work that you did, or you're doing. Now, you also mentioned that prior to having your own practice, that you worked in a hospital setting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so not only I actually worked up to the hospital, I my first internship job actually was working. I I like a challenge, and how you can tell is that my first ever population was working with children that were on probation and their families.
Oh, lovely. Children that were behind bars, had been behind bars, and are now difficult 15, 16, 17-year olds at home and not obey. Oh boy. Well, I need to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about that, because I can't imagine that all that went well all the time. um but why won't he do what we say? I don't
Yeah.
have to. I'm almost 16. Come on. Okay. we- will be right back, and we're talking with Reesa Morala, and she's a marriage therapist and a marriage counselor, and she helps people figure it out so that they can live a good life and be together, and not go through the court system, which kind of sucks. We'll be right back. Are you looking for a powerful way to grow your brand while making a real difference? Well, Positive Talk is the perfect platform to align your message with inspiration, hope, and meaningful conversations. By sponsoring Positive Talk, your brand will reach an engaged audience that values positivity and connection. People who want to support companies that share their values. Take this opportunity to showcase your business in a space that uplifts, inspires, and creates lasting impact. Don't wait. Email me, Kevin at kmmedia.pro today to learn how you can partner with us and spread positivity while growing your brand. And welcome back, everybody. We're talking with Reesa Morala, and she is, let's see, she's an LMFT. What does that stand for?
It stands for a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Oh, very good. So you actually have a license in the grand old state of California.
I do.
Oh, very cool. And how long have you been? So tell us about the kids and the probation and the family structure. And I can only imagine, what was that like?
Um, it was probably some of the most challenging days that I had. Also, some of the most rewarding when you would finally kind of crack that shell. They were some of the hardest shells to crack. But when you did, most of the time they were just kids that were just wanting somebody to listen to them and not look at them like a criminal, and just see all the bad. And so those were some really neat times, really hard times, but it kind of set up my journey because I started from that, then working with children. So I went from probation, I worked in the school system, and even went on to be the main program therapist for a hospital program for adolescents and their families.
So you've worked with kids a good portion of your working life.
Yeah, for the probably the first half of my career as a therapist, I was with children and families specifically. And I think for me, where I made the shift was not only did I become a parent myself, as I mentioned, but I also was finding that I would get children that would kind of get dropped off by their parents, and their parents are exhausted and just at their wits' end, and they would go fix my child and then leave.
Oh, sure. It's that easy, is it?
Yeah. And I think for me, I would just sit there and go, okay, well, we could do some really great work in the room with the children. But if the household isn't changing, if the foundation isn't changing, I'm just sending them right back into the same environment and crossing my fingers that maybe something will change. And it wasn't always as fruitful, and it felt really defeating, I think, for me.
Well, a real quick story. My brother-in-law, who has since passed, he had a cocaine habit when he was young. And so he actually went into rehab for a period. And one of the things that the therapist was talking about was his relationship with his mom and dad. And he talked a lot about how that was dysfunctional, and dad was gone all the time, and mom was loved the daughter but not the son, all those intricate things that go on in family dynamics. And so the therapist said, well, you know what, let's bring mom and dad in and have a conversation with you and them. Did you ever do that? Because they refused. Mom and dad absolutely categorically said, no, that ain't our fault. That's his problem, not ours. Was that ever a thing?
Yes. I would, my number one recommendation would always be let's have a whole family kind of in there. And I would definitely get some pushback from some folks. Similar ideas you're mentioning. No, it's they're the ones that need to change. Fix that, and then everything will be better.
Because now he'll be doing exactly what we want him to do. And well, although, being addicted to cocaine is probably not a really good career move anyway. But in the family dynamic, it must be just fascinating to learn all about the different family dynamics that go into a family's, dad's distant, mom is not caring, or vice versa, and my older sister hates me, and the all that family dynamic. How do you wade through all of that?
Very carefully. It sometimes can be a lot, and that's part of the reason when I work with folks, I do really like to even get some one-on-one time with everybody that's going to be a part of who am I treating. And the reason being is because everybody has their own lens, their own version of the story. And so to be able to, like you said, wade through it all and figure out, okay, what's actually going on? Because oftentimes the surface of it, the topics might change, but the core of it, there's fairly consistent cores as far as what's actually happening. And so that's part of what I love. I think I like to call myself like a little emotional detective, is I go in there and I try to figure out, okay, what's actually happening in here, so that we can, as you mentioned, one of the things I absolutely love to do with my family is figure out what that pattern is that keeps repeating itself, and how can we break the pattern and start creating change.
Because you have to break the pattern.
Yes.
And now, do you ever have to call anybody out because they're telling a story that nobody else in the family is telling, and and they're saying this is how it is, and everybody, "Oh, I don't know what he's talking about. It's not that way at all." And do you ever have to really kind of sort that out from the story standpoint?
Yes. Absolutely. And that's one thing anybody who's ever worked with me will probably tell you is I am compassionately direct. I will call you out in a very loving way, but I will call you. I don't know if that quite matches up.
The- Say that again. You're compassionately.
Direct.
and and by the way, Easton bookholder says, "Just fix my kids, yeah."
Yeah.
And so, and thank you for listening, Miss Bookholder, and we really appreciate it. And that's how it is, in a
Mhm.
lot of cases, And then she also says, "Better relationships are worth the work." Is it when it is successful because one thing that you talk about is you don't want to be their therapist for the next 10 years.
Yes.
You want to fix the issues and give them the tools to be able to work through these things so that they can do it. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. My biggest dream in the world is to be able to be out of a job because everybody is amazingly healthy and great relationships, and then I can just go retire on a beach somewhere, preferably in Italy, and just drown myself in pasta and gelato for the rest of my life, knowing that the world is healthier and healed.
Well, I got news for you. you're you're, you're going to be working for a very, very long time to get that
I
done.
I know. It's my big dream though. But yes, I tell folks I am not interested. There are some people that kind of think about therapy and they think, "Oh gosh, I don't want to do it because it just means I'm going to be seeing a therapist for like you said the next 10 years of my life and I'm going to get sick of you. You're going to get sick of me. I have no interest in seeing you for the next 10 years and hearing about, what's happening in that way. And so I'm much more of a goal oriented kind of therapist where let's sit down, let's figure, like I said, those patterns so that we can actually put something into practice that's different and that they're practical and something that you can do on your own so that you can go and actually graduate and feel confident in that. And maybe at the beginning, the words that you're hearing are my voice in your head, but eventually it becomes their own voice and just something that they're naturally building these new habits.
Well, it is important for them to recognize that you are leading them into a better way of being.
Hmm.
And let's see, do we really and nice program and do we really know them? Sometimes you're getting lots of responses from folks. It's very nice. Um and but it's the thing. Oh, I lost my train of thought. But the thing is that when you're working with kids and parents, it's different than when you're working with the two parents that are
Hmm.
trying to salvage the relationship that they used to have before they had kids
Hmm.
and then try and make it work for them to now incorporate these young little monsters
Yes.
into their house and keep their themselves sane and happy.
Absolutely. And that was why I made the shift. So as you mentioned, I was previously working with kids and it just felt like I want to be more preventative. I want to be more helpful. So, what's really, again, going back to what's the root of this? And that's where I zoomed out and really started looking at what kind of supports do we have for the parents to create a stable foundation for these children to actually, have healthier behaviors modeled to them so that they could be more equipped to be able to handle some of just plain life growing up and some of those stressors. And so that's when I went, got additional certifications to really be able to start working with the parents and that couple relationship. Because what I was finding was that as we mentioned earlier, so many folks are going into this next stage of life and they don't have a manual. Many times they don't have a really great um, uh, construct or a model to be able to kind of look towards. And so they're just kind of trying to figure it out. And oftentimes when you put children into the mix, it's a ton of pressure. You're looking and you're saying, I want these children to be successful and amazing. And so then they put themselves and their wellness on the back burner and they put their relationship wellness on the back burner. And when that happens, that's when things start to break down. We have less capacity to be able to help our children work through emotions, maybe in a healthier way. We have less capacity to be able to actually sit down with our partner and have a really deep and connecting conversation because we're just so tapped out and there's nothing left, and we haven't been making any kind of investments towards our wellness, towards our relationship wellness. And so that's what I've been working to try to change with couples.
And I imagine that at one point when burnout sets in, as it can, if you don't take care of yourself and don't take care of each other, then it affects everybody in that household and the surrounding people who know them in that household because of the energy that it brings to that. We need to take our station break, but when we come back, I want to focus on mom and dad because I really believe that if mom and dad have their act together and are really in communication and working together for the betterment of everybody in the family, and they show love towards each other and respect and kindness and all the things we want our kids to do, the kids will model that behavior, I think. But you're going to tell me when we come back, is that a pipe dream or is that actually a possibility that if we're nice and we're take care of business, our kids will be better too. And we'll be right back. And we're talking with Reesa Morala. And if you go to, help me with your website.
EmbraceRenewalTherapy.com.
Say that again.
EmbraceRenewalTherapy.com.
EmbraceRenewalTherapy.com. Perfect. And I'm so glad that you're here. We've got lots of comments that we need to get to, and we need to take this real quick break, and we'll be right back. By the way, you're a popular young lady, I got to tell you. So we'll be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, and Reesa Morala is with us. And did I do that right?
You're getting it just right off your tongue, man.
That is so unlike me, and just got to tell you, and it really is cool. You are really fascinating, by the way, because of all the work that you've done and so many things. And I wanted to touch bases with you on that commercial or that public service announcement, because can you imagine 4 million children and kids that are homeless or on the streets or being trafficked because the situation at home is so poor that they either run away from home. I've known a bunch of kids that did that, or they get kicked out of their home, or whatever it is. It really is depressing, isn't it?
It sure is. And it's a real thing. It's out there. I've met these children. I've talked to these children who are now even adults who are now struggling again, trying to create different patterns and different ways of life. And it's hard, especially when you don't have much support. So absolutely.
And let's go through some of the comments that we've got here. So, and Omar said, "My name is Omar, and I've been watching your show for the past few weeks. Well, I've got 980 of them. Where you been?" And you do have some interesting guests, and then Miss Burkholder says 12-step emphasis, control and influence, and being responsible for what we can control and what we can influence. Would you agree?
So I definitely think that there is absolutely a lot of benefit to being able to walk that line of figuring out what are the things that are within my control, and what are the things that aren't. Because trying to control what your partner is doing and what they're saying is likely never going to happen. But we can choose how we talk to them, some of the conversations that we have after the fact, those repairs, and the steps that we are taking to invest. Because making a choice, or even not making a choice in itself, is a choice. And so we get to decide every single day.
And that's an important step that a lot of people miss.
Yes.
That they get a choice. Now, she also says, and this is so true, people do not talk before marriage about religion, finances, and how to raise kids. Why don't we, when we get a marriage license, why can't we have like a test and to see if people are actually ready for the responsibility of bringing themselves together with the finances and what happens when we have kids and all that kind of stuff? Because a lot of people just they don't do that until it just kind of rears its ugly head and they say, "Oh, we'll figure it out then." Is it?
Oh,
And
absolutely. I wish we did have them take more tests and do, have a little just like we do with the driving license, maybe even, a little bit more intensive. But yes, I think that we don't talk about it because that's not the fun part of dating, right? There's so much of that perpetuation of, oh, when you're dating, here's this honeymoon, it's all fun, it's all great. And so when you start having conversations about religion, about finances, they don't sound as glamorous and as fun. So then we're like, oh, we'll get to that later. And then next thing you know, we're having these conversations mid tantrum of, your 3-year-old, and then it's probably not a super successful conversation.
well, and especially when you're talking about like politics and stuff, because
Yeah.
when we first got married, I'll use myself as an example. When we first got married, we were kind of in lockstep about politics and who we liked and who we didn't like and what we wanted to see, and then over time it changed into she became difficult and viewed things in a completely wrong way from my perspective, and in her way it was the right way and stuff. So and people do change, and you've got to adapt to those things as well, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up because not only start in the dating side of things, that when you're first new in this relationship, having those conversations, but continue those conversations as you continue to grow up. Because, like you said, you're going to experience life, you're going to have things that change that are going to probably shift your perspective. And so, if you, let's say you start that at the beginning of your relationship and you have a conversation about finances or religion or politics, and you're on the same page, great. But if you stop having that conversation 10 years from now, you're now working with 10-year-old information about the person that's sitting across from you. So it's just like if you were trying to operate, and navigate the roads now with one of those old, the printed fold out, that's like huge maps. If you tried to like get from point A to point B with one of those maps, nowadays with how many changes there have been, how much the city has grown, you're probably going to get lost. It's the same thing. Why would you want to navigate your relationship with an outdated map? You wouldn't do that on the roads.
Especially since men don't look at maps, which
Don't
which
ask questions.
which can be a real problem with why don't you ask directions? Why don't worry, honey, I'll find it. That can be a sore point as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that ends up happening in the room a lot with my couples because if you've got a particular way, so for example, we talk about just gender stereotypes. Oftentimes I hear from, more often than not, female presenting, oh, they don't my partner doesn't talk about their feelings and I just want to know what's happening inside of them. And meanwhile, the, male presenting partner is going, just leave me alone. I just want to be in silence. That's what I want.
Uh, we are, as human animals, we are so complex when it comes to things like that because women love to communicate and talk about their day and what went wrong and what happened at work and the intricacies of those relationships and who was good and who was, and men are like, I don't really care. I just want to I want to watch my television show and just, or I want to read the paper or whatever they're doing. I don't need to hear about that's, does that sound familiar?
Oh, yes. I hear that probably daily.
Well, it is so much fun for the to talk about the relationships between two people that because one of the things, and I know that you have to deal with this as well. One of the things that happens in a relationship when the kids show up, especially when the kids get to be 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or and the Oh, well, actually, never mind. It starts at the very beginning because you don't get a good night's sleep. Mom is up breastfeeding, or they're doing the things and with the kids. And so, one of the things that goes by the wayside, and I'll spell it for you, is sex in a meaningful and rewarding way for everybody, doesn't it?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. And going back to that idea of many women really do crave that emotional intimacy, which is, let me tell you about my day and everything that happened and yada, 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 yada. That's how they feel emotionally connected. And I'm going to tell you, for any man who's listening and you have a female partner and you're sitting there scratching your head and go, why can't we just have more sex? If you're not meeting the emotional needs, the likelihood that there's going to be any kind of put out of deep, meaningful physical connection is really, really slim. And so they sit there and they scratch their heads and they go, I don't know why we can't just do the things I want to do. There's some steps. It's relationships are about a compromise, and sometimes it is being able to meet those emotional needs. And then the physical needs tend to come just as the natural organic part of it.
Maybe, but but no, I agree with you, and that's the one thing that men are woefully inadequate at is listening. Of course, that seems to be a problem for all of us. Um,
Yes.
there's that old saying that said, "God gave you 2 ears and one mouth." Because you can listen twice as much as you should be able to speak. But we end up talking more about, and they do it in sales, they do it in business, they do it in relationships. We end up talking about, okay, what am I going to say next to
Mhm.
make my point and not listen to the point that is being spoken to you. And so there's a miscommunication that is going on there, isn't there?
100%. One thing I always say is there's a difference between listening to respond versus listening to understand.
Very good. There's a bumper sticker right there. Because that all by itself could help a lot of people to live and to understand. Because
Mhm.
if you don't take the time, especially when she's talking about her work and what's happened in the day, and this is what's going on, and da da da, because that's important to her. When you poo poo it, and so that's like, oh, so you don't love me, you don't care about me, you don't care about my day. So when he comes later that night and says, "Hey, honey, hubba hubba," she says, "No, you don't care about me. I'm not doing that." You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. And I think what you mentioned there, and I want to give the whoever's listening or struggling to listen to the daily what happened in my day. I totally can appreciate many times what I see is the reason that it's such a struggle is, like you said, they've maybe had a full day of work. They're exhausted. They're, mentally tapped out. And then when you hear your partner coming to you and maybe commiserating about their day and how awful it was, how, Sally was just so rude and, whatever that looks like, that sometimes there's this pressure that, oh, they're telling me all these things because they want me to fix it. And I don't know how to fix it. And I'm so tapped out. I was fixing problems all day at work that I don't want to have to solve anything else. And the really inside secret is many times the person that's speaking isn't really looking for you to fix it. Like you said, they're just wanting to feel heard. And so sometimes it can just take as like, oh gosh, that sounds awful. I'm so sorry that happened. And boom, you're probably going to get lucky tonight.
And by the way, Miss Burkholder she says, and by the way, this is for all the men out there. Women feel turned on physically when feeling safe and pampered and listened to. Is that true?
Physically safe, but also emotionally safe. And that emotional safety is feeling like I can talk to you and that it matters and that you care about what's happening in my world too.
Because we come home and we might kick the dog and talk about how horrible our day was, and we expect them to listen to us. But when they go to the same things, we're a lot of times guys are just not sympathetic to it, and it's like, oh God, here we go again. And do I have to listen to this again? Well, there could be a good outcome at the end of the night if you do.
Yes, they're good. And that's your insider trader tips, if you will.
And if that's your jam, that's good. If you can, if you can butter your bread, you know what I mean, by being kind to your partner. And also, when we come back from this break, I want to ask you, do you have specific steps or a time of day when mom and dad, husband and wife should get together, put either the kids to bed or in the backyard or watching a movie so that they can have a meaningful conversation, just the two of them without getting interrupted? Because I think that might help. Maybe, I don't know. We never did that. I wish we did. But then she was the one who didn't like to communicate. So it's like, why do we got to talk about that? It's like, we'll be right back.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. I got to tell you, you are really cool. I like having you on the program. You're going to have to come back because we're not going to get anywhere near through all of the pitfalls and stuff that go on with relationships and marriage and children and all of that. You're a certified therapist. Well, no, you're a licensed therapist, which is different than a certified therapist. And I think, isn't it?
So I have certifications in addition to my license. So I have both technically.
So you have a real alphabet soup going on.
I do.
Well, that is so cool that you're doing that. And I was going to ask you a question a minute and a half ago, and I preferenced it before the break, and now I forgot what the question was. Do you remember?
So you were asking about that communication and when to do that.
Oh, that's right.
When can we have a meaningful?
Yeah. When can we have? Do you advocate that a couple takes the time to plan a time And maybe it can be a date night. Maybe it can be an hour a day or half hour when they just sit and concentrate on each other and the communication between them. Yeah, is that a good thing?
Yes, 1,000% yes. Um, and if you can do half an hour every single day, man, I would say yes, please run, start doing it today. Some folks, they may not always have that amount of time. And so, what I usually tell folks is depending on your schedule, just find something that you can do. And it could even be a 6-second kiss that you are intentional about every single day, where you are grabbing your partner and for 6 seconds, you have to lock lips. If you want to go further than 6 seconds, by all means, I'm not going to stop you at 6 seconds, but it needs to be a full 6 seconds. You cannot let go. And even something like that, everybody has 6 seconds in their day that we can find and actually dedicate towards investing in our partner and building that relationship. I love to look at it as a way of just as we invest in our money bank, investing in your love bank as well. And so each time we are doing something that is intentionally tuning into our partner, whether, like I said, it's a 6-second kiss, it's an actual conversation where we are listening to understand, each one of those is a deposit into your love bank. And the goal is to have a surplus of deposits so that when you have fights, when you have disagreements, which is completely normal, we're two human beings trying to coexist. You're going to have complaints, you're going to have disagreements. That makes a withdrawal from the account. And so if you've got a really low love bank account and you're adding in the normal amounts of disagreement, you're going to go into an overdraft state really, really fast. So the more that we can actually intentionally invest, whether, like you said, it's a conversation, put it on your calendar. I understand it doesn't feel super sexy to like have a calendar date to talk to your partner. Do it. We're entering, especially if you've got kids, we've got to have some flexibility on what sexy looks like. And so it's okay, put it on the calendar because that's you intentionally investing in your relationship and making a deposit. And so when you're able to do that, if you do have kids, what I always tell folks, if you're going to have 30 minutes, let's say you only get 30 minutes to be able to connect with one another, set a timer, 5 minutes or 10 minutes that you can talk about the kids and commiserate about what Johnny did or what Susie didn't do. And then after that, no more talking about the kids. You are only talking about you and what's happening in your relationship, in your life, and tuning into your partner.
Absolute great advice. Great advice. And yes, she says all humans just want to someone to care about our successes and failures, little ones, and no one, little ones that no one else cares about. And she also says, haha, Saturday morning cartoons was in a previous decade. Now you got cartoons all the time. Just put them in front of the TV and have them watch a movie or a cartoon and and go to a place where they can't hear you. But because sometimes those quiet moments get a lot more, like frisky, as they say. I did want to ask you. I had a couple on the show a year and a half ago. They have a podcast, and it's called One Extraordinary Marriage, and they advocated doing what they called the 60-day challenge.
Okay.
That barring monthly cycles, that they would have sex every day for 60 days. What do you think? Is that a good idea?
That's a lot of pressure.
Well, that's true, because if he says I am not in the mood, you better take him at his word for it, because you might be disappointed.
Yeah, I think I think the intention, absolutely, I can appreciate and respect it so much. I think the difficulty when we start adding some of those bigger day challenges is it can be, life happens and it can be a lot to live up to. And sometimes it can feel really disappointing then when you don't do it. So let's say it is 60 days and something happens, life happens, and you don't do it. That we're really good, I find, as human beings at beating ourselves up. And so it doesn't happen. And then we start getting critical on ourselves. We get critical with our partner. We didn't do it. You must not really be invested in this relationship. You don't want us to succeed. And then we're creating kind of more issues than really needs to happen. So if you're going to start with a challenge like that, I honestly would say let's start out smaller. Let's meet that goal, because then once we meet it, we feel really good. We're like, yeah, we did it. And then we want to do it again, and then we can extend it a little bit more.
I think with kids around, that makes really a lot of sense. And and by the way, my ex-wife, I think at one point in our marriage, actually said this: "Don't interrupt me unless there's a bone poking out of your skin or there's blood gushing, because I'm talking now." Um, I can't see. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think the thing we just have to be mindful of, if you're the person talking and you're going on and on and on, that sometimes we have to share the conversation too, so we can lose a listener if we're droning on for 30 minutes uninterrupted. So we just got to make sure that we're mindful of sharing the space too.
So at one point in time, you should say, "Oh dear, how was your day too?" And because when he walks in and it's, "Hi, honey, how are you?" And then da 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 da, and now, and just so forth and so on. So, by the way, we're talking with Reesa Morala, and go to our website again, which is,
EmbraceRenewalTherapy.com.
and you're in California, but you can probably work with people all over the world, can't you?
Yeah, so if we're talking therapy, you do have to physically be located in California. So I do weekend retreats. So if you want to come on down to Southern California wine country, which is where my office is located, come on out, do a little wine tasting, and do some great work on your relationship. But I also offer workshops that are virtual, and those are open to anybody worldwide that has an internet connection. So I have couples workshops. I have workshops specifically for those that are having a new baby. And so really trying to make sure that we fortify your relationship before we bring in that new child, or right as we're bringing it in, because that's a tough transition. And yes, those are absolutely open to anyone worldwide.
That is a huge trend. I've never understood how people can have a baby, and then 10 months later they have another one. It's like, because the memory is too fresh for her, I would think. She wants nothing to do with you, because you made her go through all that. But in any event, I would like, we've run out of time. You know,
Oh,
I hate
so
that we've
sad.
run out of time.
Yes,
You are so
me
cool.
too.
I really appreciate you. Will you come back?
Yes, I would love that. Just let me know when.
Well, I'll tell you what. And we'll talk about that when we get done, which we are going to get done here in just a second. But before we go, I want you to tell our audience anything that we haven't covered, or we haven't covered it. Anything that you would like them to know.
Um, as far as services, like I said, you can find all of that on embracerenewaltherapy.com. I also have a parenting podcast that's on there. It's called The Real Family Eats. And so you get to hear a parenting story, and guests also share a recipe. So no more of that, what's for dinner tonight. Just listen to an episode and just make whatever I'm making on the podcast. And that's all on my website as well. And yes, it's absolutely possible for change. Both parties need to be invested in wanting to do it. And if you're needing some help, come find me and I'll help you out.
So, and the podcast again is called
The Real Family Eats.
I love that. So it's a real family story, and then you're doing a recipe, so that's a great niche to be in, by the way, because
Thank you.
everybody wants something that is new and different that they don't know. Because that's the other thing is it used to be when I was a kid that women grew up and knew how to cook, and that was all part of their training. That doesn't happen anymore. So you end up spending a lot of money Ubering and ordering out,
Mhm.
or you have what? We're having spaghetti again? kind of thing, because it is really important. Thank you so much for being here. And like I said, you're going to have to come back. So yeah, I want to again thank you. And Reesa Morala has been our guest. Go to our website again, which is
EmbraceRenewalTherapy.com.
And very cool. And hold on. And okay. No, it's well, sometimes the best plans, but in any event, thank you, Reesa. I really have enjoyed your conversation today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And now away we go. Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin at kmmedia.pro.